Auctions in Sydney and Melbourne are on the rise again after a partial lifting of lockdown restrictions. Hundreds of sales are scheduled for this weekend in an apparent return to normal. To tell us more, Nerida Conisbee, Chief Economist from REA Group. Nerida, good morning. Auctions are getting back to normal, sort of, in Melbourne and Sydney.
Yeah, they are slowly getting back to normal. I think the thing is that it is the first weekend where we have both Melbourne and Sydney auctions, live auctions taking place, so moving away from that online model. The thing is, though, is that we do have extremely low volumes taking place. So we have a look at the same time last year. It was actually the federal election, so we already had quite low auction numbers this time last year, but we're down 66% in Sydney. We're down around 23% in Melbourne. So it's quite a dramatic situation in terms of auction numbers, but it does seem to be holding up the clearance rate. If we have a look at Sydney last weekend, which was the first time we had seen a return to live auctions, we did see a 70% clearance rate. So the buyers are out there, but there really isn't much for them to buy.
Some talk from the federal government that restrictions will be eased so people can travel around Australia, but that's not certain at this point. What will be the impact if most Australians continue to holiday at home?
Well, it would be good news if we could holiday. You know, I think one of the problems for the travel industry is obviously that overseas tourism has dried up, but also domestic tourism is pretty much non-existent at the moment. For now, it does look like we won't see overseas tourists for quite some time. I guess the good news is that Australians also won't be able to travel, so they will be overseas, so they will be stuck here in Australia. I mean, not exactly good news, but in terms of a financial impact. So Australians overseas spend more money than tourists from overseas spend in Australia. The areas that will benefit, it will be quite interesting. If we have a look at the places domestic tourists do like to travel, it does tend to be major cities. So Melbourne CBD tops the list, followed by Sydney CBD, followed by Brisbane. Beyond that, it does seem to be places like northern New South Wales is very popular. Mornington Peninsula is another one. So we do tend to travel quite close to our capital cities. I think the big one will be around how tourism marketing campaigns go. I mean, there are a lot of amazing places in Australia that people can travel to. So, you know, I think this will be a great opportunity for Australia's tourism industry to really target domestic tourists, and hopefully it will allow many of them to do quite well despite those lack of overseas tourists.
Well, before COVID-19 wobbled the world on its axis, the property market in Australia had started to really move. We were starting to see banks finally get a little bit softer with restrictions in and around lending after the Royal Commission. Well, that's all turned around, hasn't it? Trying to get a home loan at the moment is really difficult.
Yeah, it is difficult. I mean, we've been looking closely at a lot of the Smartline data, our mortgage broking business, to see what's happening with applications for mortgages and submissions. I guess one of the challenges for mortgage brokers at the moment is that a lot of people are going through financial stress. So there is a lot of help being given to people trying to navigate the system and trying to navigate what all the different lenders are offering. In terms of what we're seeing, in terms of activity, what we Smartline are seeing is that there are a lot of people looking around for better deals. So I guess, you know, that is one positive, that there are some amazing deals out there. But like you said, the challenge is getting finance. That a lot of lenders are just cracking down. Their banks are flush with cash, but they are very concerned about rising unemployment and people's ability to pay off loans in the future.
Well, what do people need to do you think, Nerida, basically to get their ducks in a row before... look, we've been through this ourselves, buying property over the years, but what about for young people who are really trying to get that first toe in?
Yeah, I mean, I've recently gone through getting a construction loan, and I guess one of the things is getting all your information together. So outlining your expenditure, finding, you know, very much giving a lot of detail on your income. I think one of the things with expenditure, a lot of things can creep up on you. If you know, things like Afterpay are considered, and, you know, that is a very popular method of payment for younger people. So that is taken into account. I guess fundamentally the banks are wanting to be comforted that you can pay back the loan in the future. So, you know, I think if you think through that, you know, if you think through what your income is and what your expenses are and the best way to communicate that, then that's probably the first step.
I know we tend to ask this question every week, but I know that people watching are keen to hear your response. The property market, we're getting all sorts of all sorts of things written up that they're quite two ends of the spectrum. One saying that it's going to fall flat, others saying it won't. What are you thinking?
Look, the thing is, I don't think we'll get to that doom and gloom 30% scenario. I mean, and if you have a look at a lot of the modelling that's taking place, they range from a very minor impact on pricing to a 30%. So, it is quite unlikely we will get to that sort of decline. I think the thing is, though, the market will be very two-paced in terms of, for many capital cities. If you have a look at somewhere like Sydney at the moment, we can see that premium suburbs are holding up pretty well in terms of buyer search activity. We can see that they're not impacted as much by rental declines. If you go to high development areas in Western Sydney and southwestern Sydney, where there has been very, very high levels of new apartment development, those do seem to be the areas that are being impacted more so. We had a look recently, actually during the week, at areas that are seeing high levels of discounting. And it does seem to be places that have a lot of house and land development, have a lot of apartments. So, that seems to be flowing through into those areas. The other areas that do seem to be being impacted are areas that have a lot of holiday homes. And again, it makes sense. I mean, if you have a look at the area that we're seeing the most discounting in Melbourne at the moment, it's actually Portsea. So, I think one of the first things to go is a holiday home, and as a result, some of those destinations are seeing impacts on pricing.